Welcome everybody, and thank you very much for taking the time to come to this live event to mark World Homeless Day. And today you'll hear from Paul Prosser, who heads up NOAA support services for people who are homeless. Paul will be given an overview of homelessness in Bedfordshire and speaking about what the future might look like for poverty and homelessness in the UK and what NOAA will be doing to help. Paul will be talking for 20 minutes or so, and there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. So I'll be grateful if you could stay muted whilst Paul's speaking and hold questions to the end, or maybe put them into the chat box. We will be recording the event today, so if you'd rather stay anonymous, feel free to switch off your camera or depersonalise your name in the settings. So I'll start with a brief overview of NOAA. And for those of you who haven't heard of NOAA or aren't familiar with NOAA, we were founded in 1987 by Sister Eileen O'Mahony, who is a daughter of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. Now, St. Vincent devoted his life to the care of people in destitution in 17th century France, and he's the patron saint of all charitable societies. Now, today, there's only over 2 million people working and volunteering in organisations inspired by the example of St. Vincent, and NOAA are one of those organisations, and we seek to help the most disadvantaged in the local community. And that means those who are most marginalised or socially excluded or have simply fallen into poverty. Fundamentally, at NOAA, we believe that every person has infinite value and worth, especially those who have faced hardship. NOAA are not just about homelessness though. Every year, we work with almost 2,000 people experiencing poverty and other disadvantages, and we try to help them to make positive changes in their lives, whether that be in finding a place to live, learning new skills, or getting back into the world of work. So, for example, NOAA's Academy seeks to prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place. We provide training, coaching, and mentoring to help people to improve the opportunities for permanent employment. And through our in-house recruitment agency, Rainbow Recruitment, we find jobs for our students when they've completed their programs. Many of our Academy students have been out of work for long periods, perhaps because they've been bringing up their children, perhaps because they've been in prison, or perhaps because of health issues. The core of NOAA's approach is to see the unique potential in each person, taking the time to build a relationship of mutual trust. And that trust is crucial because many people who we work with have experienced severe trauma and have been let down by the system. And you'll hear more about trauma and building trust from Paul. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to Paul, who will focus in on homelessness. Over to you, Paul.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you for that, David. So thank you again for joining us this evening, 6 o'clock on a Sunday night. Got some slides to show you guys, and we're going to cover a few different topics around homelessness just to mark the significance of World Homelessness Day. So thank you for joining us. There will be, as David mentioned, time for questions at the end. You can put the questions in the chat and we can talk to you if you have anything that you'd like further information about. Hopefully you can all see what I'm sharing. So first of all, I'm going to look a little bit about rough sleeping in Bedfordshire at the moment. So those of you who know NOAA know that we work with people who are homeless and particularly rough sleeping. This is going to be pitched at people who are quite new to this issue, and it's not necessarily going to be for people who work in the sector. And I'm also going to focus quite a lot on rough sleeping rather than overall homelessness. The wider context of homelessness is that there are around 280,000 people who are homeless in the UK, according to local councils. And of that group, about 2,600 are currently sleeping outside. So rough sleeping is around about 1% of the overall level of homelessness, but it's the area that NOAA focus the vast majority of our efforts on supporting. So a little bit about homelessness just as background for those of you interested. The situations that cause people to lose their tenancies are varied, and these are a selection of some of the situations that people might face. Sadly, the challenges that come with those circumstances are quite significant, and it can take a long while for us to help people on the road to recovery, but it's certainly a big part of what we do. One of the key causes of homelessness is the experience of trauma and traumatic experiences in life, and often as a young person or as a child. And the people who are sleeping on the streets for the longest tend to have had seriously disadvantaged childhoods, and that's one of the things that has impacted their ability to cope with daily life. But other factors are highlighted on this list. So what's going on in rough sleeping levels in Bedfordshire at the moment? So NOAA have got key services based in Luton and central Bedfordshire. And what this graph shows you is that over the last 2 years or a year and a half since the pandemic began, the levels of rough sleeping have declined significantly. And so prior to the pandemic, the figures were kind of in the 20s for Luton and central Bedfordshire, and now they're down in the tens and the single digits. And I think that really is good news as far as we're concerned and as far as people in poverty are concerned. But it is a temporary respite, because what's happened is that during the pandemic, there's been a lot of short-term funding being put in to support people rough sleeping. And that's meant that a lot more people have gone into temporary accommodation than normal. So there's a lot fewer people sleeping outside. The challenge, of course, is what happens after the pandemic finishes and what happens in terms of government future priority. And that's a big part of our campaign work, is can we keep the levels as low as possible? And also, even if those levels are low, let's get them lower. Let's reduce rough sleeping completely. Nobody should have to rough sleep in Bedfordshire at all. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that the figures don't necessarily reflect what we'd call the churn or the turnover rate of rough sleeping. So there's not necessarily a static population of people on the streets. Unfortunately, there's new people finding themselves homeless continuously, as well as other people coming off of the streets as well. Okay, going to tackle this one because this is a question that I am frequently asked when I speak to public groups. And that is, how can we help someone who we see sleeping outside? And I think the starting thing is that you can be reassured that our outreach teams are working across Luton and central Bedfordshire. And if there's anybody sleeping outside in Luton or central Bedfordshire, the chances are we are already aware of them and we're already helping them. But that doesn't mean that you should just walk past and do nothing. There are some options you can take. And these are the suggestions that I make. And they are fundamentally offer people dignity and respect and check they're okay. Download the StreetLink app, which is a way that you can flag the location of somebody to us so we can go out and see them, or commit and support a local charity who are doing work supporting people who are homeless. Very happy to come back to those 4 points in the Q&As if anyone wants to ask any other questions. Okay, the way that we deliver our support at NOAA is based around this philosophy. And our approach is about including people in their recovery journey and helping facilitate and enable change rather than forcing through our own agenda. And that means we're all about empowering people to recover in the time frame and on the journey that they want to recover on, rather than us mandating any form of support. And it tends to happen when people have the drive, the tools, and the skills. That's when we see real transformation happening. What do we do for people? So you might be interested to know that NOAA actually have very little of our own accommodation. And what we actually do is we generally act as the facilitator. So our role predominantly through our outreach teams and our welfare centre team is actually to provide a range of different options and choices to people. So we are very, very well connected into a whole range of different accommodation solutions. And what we will do is we will offer people choice as much as we can about the range of different facilities that are out there in the community. Of course, if some people have already been through some facilities and then become homeless a second time, it gets much more difficult. But we like to think that everybody has always got a choice at some point in time. And we want to continue to be as creative as we possibly can to try to find something that works for everybody. I mentioned that rough sleeping has declined significantly in the last 2 years. That has been primarily as a result of very heavy government investment. So a national campaign called Everybody In meant that local authorities and councils in Luton and central Bedfordshire and all across the country had extra resources to help people who are sleeping outside to be safe during the pandemic. Now that meant that a lot of people went into hotel accommodation. Now you might say that hotel accommodation isn't a permanent fix, and you would definitely be right. The number of people in hotel accommodation is astonishing, and of course it's not the solution. We need to find somewhere for people to live, which is much better than staying in a hotel. But what it has done is it has meant that a lot of people have been able to come off the streets during the last 2 years. Okay, I'm going to move on and look a little bit at the future of NOAA services. So what we're doing at NOAA is we're focusing on how we can provide services to people in a COVID safe way. Now, many people will know NOAA of the welfare centre at Park Street, and that's where we have traditionally hosted meals and provided a drop-in service. That's had to change during the last 2 years, but what we've continued to do during the last 2 years is provide quality one-to-one appointments all the way through the last 2-year period so that people can get quality advice from us. But we haven't been able to have the communal space that we had before because it's not been safe to people to be in groups. So what we're doing is we're gradually bringing that back. So we're reopening our communal spaces, but we're not opening them all at once because our welfare centre is quite a confined space. So the main services that we're providing at the moment is one-to-one appointments every day from 9 till 4, or every weekday from 9 till 4, and one-to-one appointments at the weekends between 10 and 2. And then on top of that, we have reopened our dining room, so we can have people in for a sit-down meal or a takeaway meal if they prefer to have something to take away with them. What we're doing in addition to that is we're placing a variety of different activity groups to every afternoon. So each day of the week, we're going to have a different activity group where people can come in and socialise and have that sense of community. We know that people who are rough sleeping are off of the streets, but we also know that they've lost a sense of community and a sense of relationship, and we want to try to rebuild that in a COVID safe way. So I want to just share a short story with you about an individual that we've been supporting. So back in 2013, I was in the NOAA Welfare Centre in Park Street, and a lady was making a lot of noise in our dining room, and she was very upset and she was very distressed and she was quite intoxicated. And she was so angry that she was threatening one of our staff members with a fork to attack them. And the staff members were quite intimidated, and this lady was being quite violent. And it was quite a dangerous situation, and it was a distressing situation for everybody. Unfortunately, we had to escort the lady off of the property because it wasn't safe for her to be there because she was causing too much distress to other people. Now, this is someone who was going through some really difficult circumstances in their life, and they had a really significant drug problem, and they had experienced a lot of trauma. Their partner had been murdered about 12 months earlier in really tragic circumstances, and they were drinking heavily every day, and they were using a lot of drugs, and they were really, really upset. What happened was, about 6 months later, this lady went to court, and the judge said that they'd run out of options to how they could possibly help her, and they didn't know what to do. The only option that they were able to provide was the opportunity to go into a rehab place and get some help there rather than go to prison. Now, the lady at the time didn't really want to do that, but she did take up the opportunity to go to rehab, and she went to a rehabilitation centre in Hemel Hempstead. Now, those of you who might know something about rehab will know that it's a very, very difficult situation. You have to relive a lot of your previous past, and you have to look reality in the face, and it's quite a painful process. Well, after 6 months, she was coping quite well with the rehab, and after a year had completely completed the rehab program and had managed to be abstinent from all drugs. After a year later, she actually was offered a role at the rehab centre as a support worker to other people who are facing similarly traumatic experiences. And in September this year, so literally last month, she returned back to Luton, and she sat down with our staff team, And she said to our staff team that her life is completely different to how it was when she was sleeping outside in Luton and when she was drinking heavily and using drugs every day. And for our staff team and our volunteers, that was a really, really inspiring thing to hear, because day in, day out, they're faced with people who it's very difficult to know what the situation is and what's really going on behind the scenes. And so for them, hearing that this change had happened and that she had made a full recovery and was now helping other people to transform their lives was absolutely incredible. And it's stories like that and it's moments like that where we think so grateful to be able to do the work that we can do and to walk alongside people in their recovery journey in the privileged position that we have to do that. And she was very thankful for the time that she had at Noah and for the fact that we were there for her and we put food on her table and we cared for her and we didn't give up on her. And she said that sometimes when we'd said to her no, and we'd said to her to take some responsibility, that those are actually the conversations that persuaded her to get help. So it was a remarkable thing to hear. So looking at where Noah is headed to next, went far too forward. We have published a 5-year strategy, and that sets out where we want to go as an organisation. So we can never be quite sure what the future holds. And for Noah, we want to be an organisation which is able to be flexible and which meets the needs of the community, whatever they might be, whether that's people that are homeless or rough sleeping or in other forms of extreme poverty across Bedfordshire. So the main areas that we want to focus on are replacing our welfare centre at Park Street, supporting younger people into work, reacting to new areas of need, such as perhaps supporting refugees and asylum seekers who might need quality legal advice, looking at different social enterprises, so moving maybe away from retail and trying something new that are businesses that can help to employ vulnerable people, and expanding our Housing First project, which is an approach which has had really significant impact on homelessness. So they are some of our ideas for the next 5 years. Our strategy document is on the website if you'd like to have a look at it, but we're happy to chat through that. We've got loads of news coming through on our website and on our Facebook streams and on our LinkedIn streams. So do keep tabs of those if you want to keep knowing what the situation is developing at Noah and how we're developing our work. And finally, I would just invite you, if you're interested, to watch our new Housing First video. We've just published this and it talks about the impact of our Housing First project, which is some work in Luton that provides people with flexible support and their own flat, and it helps people to leave homelessness and rough sleeping behind. And I will put the YouTube video link into the chat box if I can work out how to do it, and then you are very welcome to copy and paste that and put it into YouTube, and it's a 3.5 minute video about our Housing First project. I'm not gonna play it now, but you're welcome to look at it at a later time. Okay, that pretty much concludes the summary that we wanted to cover with you this evening. Actually rattled through that a bit quicker than I thought. So I hope I covered everything clearly, but we're very happy to talk about our work. So yeah, now is a good time for questions. If you'd like to put any questions into the chat, or alternatively come off mute if you'd like to ask them, and we can have a bit of a chat about our work.
Wrong one.
Hi, is that Teresa coming off mute? Yeah. Hi, Teresa.
Yes, it is. Yes. One thing I wanted to know, where are you looking for new premises? Have you got anything in mind as to whereabouts we're going to go?
Great question. Thank you for that. I don't know if David wants to come in on this, but basically the plan is that we want to rebuild the site on Park Street. So right. We've got a great situation in terms of the location where we are on Park Street. So what we'd like to do is to be able to bulldoze the current building, which is quite old, as you may know, and put on there a brand new premises, which is going to be have lots of facilities to do all the work we want to do over the next future decades, but it's going to cost quite a lot of money. So we need to find out how we can get sufficient support for that property, and then we need to obviously get the building underway. So it's going to be around £4 to £5 million to create that vision.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, and just to come in on that point as well, what we'd like to do at our site in Park Street is to bring the academy and our welfare services, which Paul has been talking about, all under one roof, so that we can really create a vibrant environment where people can see progress being made all around them. So we have a great environment in our welfare centre already, but the more training and learning that people can do under the same roof, the better the atmosphere, I think, and the more inspiration people will feel. And also on top of that as well, we will be opening more small stores, more charity shops as well within Bedfordshire, and also as opportunities arise across Hertfordshire and Buckinghamshire as well.
Well, that's good, because I remember Noah when it was in Brook Street, when it first started in Brook Street. And Sister Eileen was like those little tiny flats that were disused flats, and we were serving soup and bread. And I remember one particular incident there, which was stuck with me forever. We had a family come in with a mother and father and some children, and for some reason the father and one of the children were outside. But the mother and the children were sitting around the table, and I think one of the volunteers found a jar of jam in the cupboard and said to these children, "Would you like jam on your bread?" "Wow, we could have jam on our bread. Wow." And they were literally, you see these children eating this jam thing, and you saw them going out, "We've had jam on our bread. We've had jam on our bread." And it was just as though we'd offered them £1 million. It was incredible to see that. And it's wonderful how far Noah's comes from that. You know what I mean?
Thanks, Teresa. I love hearing stories about how Noah has been in the past. And I love hearing people who've been with Noah on the whole journey. It's absolutely incredible. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
Have we got any other questions, or anyone wanted to ask anything about the presentation, or anything about homelessness? I know we've got one from Stephen.
Oh, sorry.
I've got one from Stephen that I'm going to just get some information about. You're interested in rough sleeping data, is that right, Stephen? Okay.
Whilst Paul's looking up the information for Stephen, Georgina, hi Georgina, you've asked, can you have the name of the app for information if you see a person sleeping rough? And the app is StreetLink. And so, Georgina, you may already be aware that every local authority has a designated provider who receives calls from StreetLink. And StreetLink is an app where any member of the public can notify the StreetLink if they see a person sleeping rough. And then it gets collated into StreetLink, and then a provider gets sent out to them to help them within 24 hours, I believe. And as Paul said, most people who will be contacted through StreetLink will already be supported through one of the providers, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use StreetLink, because you never know who isn't being supported through the providers. And Paul, perhaps Paul, you could expand on this at the right time, but many times it takes many offers of help for a person to actually accept that offer, and sometimes years to build up that trust with the person in the first place. So always worth going to StreetLink if you can.
Yeah, it's particularly helpful for people who are maybe rough sleeping in a rural area. So somebody's in a tent somewhere or field, and our outreach teams aren't aware of them. That is when the information is absolutely critical. And the Central Bedfordshire team have got loads of examples of when they've had a StreetLink referral from somebody in a village or a field, and nobody's known they're there. But once that referral comes in, they can direct their resources immediately. Not quite so good if somebody's in the town centre, but in a rural area, it's fantastic. Stephen, I just wanted to double check what your question was regarding. Was it regarding the work that NOAA have delivered over the last year and a half, or the rough sleeping levels?
The rough sleeping levels, I think, and the people that you've helped. I was thinking, for instance, ex-service people, male, female split, age.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There's loads of that I can provide you. I'm quite happy to go to that in detail, potentially out of here, but we have got the demographic breakdowns. Across Bedfordshire, the official count in Luton has gone from 47 people sleeping outside in 2018 to 43 in 2019 to 15 in November 2020. And there'll be another count that will be carried out in November this year. I think it'll be below a dozen, probably, is my guess. So still not zero, which isn't low enough, but heading in the right direction.
And across Bedfordshire, one stat which absolutely it really strikes me is that there are 200 children who are homeless across Bedfordshire at the moment. Now, as Paul said, that doesn't mean that they are street homeless, but it means that they do not have a permanent place of residence. They could be sleeping on somebody else's sofa, which is normally going to be the case for a child who is homeless. And in this day and age, that that's very, very striking indeed. Yeah. Can you drop me your email, Stephen, and I'll send you some more bits and pieces.
Great, thank you.
Good. Any other questions in the chat? Anything else anyone wanted to put to us while they've got the opportunity, or are we covered everything?
What is what is that thing about housing first? Housing first, what is it?
Good question, Teresa, good question. So housing first is basically, it sounds quite simple, but it's slightly more complicated in reality. It's basically providing people with a their own one-bedroom flat and lots of support to keep that tenancy. So the way that it works is that people who've been sleeping outside for a really long time have sometimes been into hostels and night shelters, and then been evicted, and then been in again, and then been evicted, and then been in again. And what we find is that Housing First gives somebody their own front door. And so once they've got their own front door, we will meet them as much as they want. So maybe 3 or 4 times a week, and we'll go and hang out with them, and we'll help them with their bills, and we'll help them chat with their neighbours, and we'll do everything we possibly can to help them to maintain that tenancy and not go back to sleeping outside. So in effect, it's a flat and a lot of support. And in itself, that has been really transformational. So nobody who went onto the Housing First project has ended up sleeping outside again.
Wow, that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not easy, but it is. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah,
I'll put the link in the chat for the video, so you can have a little look at our new video.
And Paul, perhaps it might be worth talking about the fact that no one in NOAA's Housing First project, and in fact nationally, it's fairly similar picture. No one has actually dropped out of Housing First. So we've got 100% success rate in Luton so far, but even nationally, I think that it's 90% because of the way that Housing First is set up. And then perhaps also in terms of eviction rates from hostels and so on, how your team has managed to bring eviction rates from our accommodation projects right down to a minimum by the way that we support people with understanding and care and patience. Would it be possible to talk about that, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think evictions are really difficult because with supported housing projects, you often have lots of people who are very vulnerable living in the same place. And so that means that personalities can clash and people can get upset with each other. And obviously, some people might have addictions and therefore be intoxicated. So it's really difficult to maintain those places that are really peaceful and are safe. And I think one of the things we tried to do is listen to the folks that we're supporting and try to give them an environment which is as safe and as welcoming and as family-like as possible. And as much as we can, have people have the dignity to have their own front door and their own personal space and as fewer rules as possible, so that there's less reason for them to be asked to leave, because asking people to leave is the worst thing that any homelessness charity can do. And we all avoid it as much as we can.
Mm. If we see someone on the street, is it a good idea perhaps to get them some food or direct them to Noah? Or because I know that lots of people are begging.
Yep.
But I don't want to give them money, obviously. You know what I mean?
Yep. So this is a really big question, and I will just repost the suggestions again in the chat. So yes, I think for my personal opinion is that at the point you see somebody at that situation, your heart is moved because you want to do something and you want to improve the situation, and you don't want to see them suffer in that way. And so the difficult thing is what do you do? What's the right thing to do, and what's going to make a difference? And there are complex things that we're always trying to work out. What should I do? It could be dependent on the time of the day, how much time you have, how much money you have. Lots of things will affect what you might do at that point in time. I think that offering food is a really nice thing to do because it shows that you care. And so even if somebody doesn't want anything to eat or a drink, at least they know that you care and that you stopped and that you're interested in them. Possibly they're not hungry, you know, possibly they're not thirsty. So there's no guarantee that they are hungry or thirsty. So if they've had 5 or 6 or 7 people also offer them something to eat or drink, they might not be hungry or thirsty, but at least you told them that they matter. And at least you said, look, I do care. I'm interested in you. I'm interested in helping you. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the conversation might move on to finances. And so that's a situation that you perhaps know that's going to happen. But for starters, I think it's a lovely thing to do to offer someone a drink or something to eat.
Because we've got a persistent beggar that comes round the corner from us.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to him and I've chatted to him, but he started out, he's going along the cars, stopping cars and banging on windows of cars and things like that. And there's also somebody in Berry Park now with a great big placard saying, we want money. It's a case of knowing whether they're really homeless.
Yeah. So what I'd say on the back of that is that begging is a really big problem. And of course, it's intimidating and it's scary and it's not nice to see it because you don't know what to do. You don't know whether the need for cash is genuine or not. You have no idea. And realistically, there's no way for you to be able to tell. I would say that our outreach teams have met everybody begging and offered them all help. So there is nobody who's begging who hasn't been offered help from Noah in Luton. I can guarantee you that.
Right.
The other thing to say is that a lot of people begging are doing so because they have got a Class A drug addiction, and that is completely controlling their life. So that Class A drug addiction is controlling all of their decision making, and they are basically desperate. They're desperate to be able to have the finances to be able to use those drugs to be able to feel okay. And so that's the underlying reality of a lot of begging that you see. I wouldn't say it's 100% of the time, it's maybe 80% of the time, but there's very, very, very few people who are begging because they want money for accommodation. That's very unlikely.
Right. Yeah.
And also, if I could just quote a piece of research which Paul himself carried out a few years ago, most people who are begging are homeless, and most people do not have access to alternative funds if they are begging as well. Some people do have access to benefits who are begging, but the majority don't. And largely, the concept of professional begging, where people are earning more than some people who go out to work, is a bit of a myth. Paul, would you back that up? Does that coincide with it? Does that complement your research?
Absolutely. So our knowledge of begging, and this is based upon our outreach teams who meet people day in, day out. So it's not something we've made up. It's quite a detailed knowledge of the situation and its relationship with people that gives us this knowledge, is that nobody is begging and making thousands and thousands of pounds and taking it all home and putting it in a bank account and buying a nice car. That is not happening at all. People who are begging are making a lot of money and it's all going on their addiction, all of it. They're not saving it, It's all going on the addiction, and maybe £100 a day or £200 a day. And that's because they're desperate to fuel that addiction. So for us, you know, we don't just leave it there. We obviously want to help people to recover if they want to recover. So like the lady that I talked about before, we really work closely with the drug therapy services because we want people to have the opportunity to recover from that addiction if they want to. So as much as we can, we'll help people to take those steps to recover if they're ready to take those steps to recover. Not everybody is, but we never give up. I've had a question from Laura in the chat with regards to the soup kitchen. So our evening meal service has not been happening for the last 2 years during the pandemic, and we're restarting it, or we have restarted it actually, and it's now happening on Tuesdays and Thursday nights. So it's not 7 days a week, but it's Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that's the reason it's not 7 days a week is because there's lots of other free hot food available in the evenings across Luton. But we're excited to be relaunching it, and we're really excited that our volunteers are going to have a chance to come back and join with us, and together we can build some evening community in Luton at the evening meal service. So if you're interested, yeah, do drop us a line. I think that might be it for the Q&As. Final call for questions if anybody has anything. No? Brilliant. Do you want to round off, David?
Yes. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to join the conversation this evening. I've certainly enjoyed it, and I think it's a great way to mark World Homeless Day. People all over the world during October are doing events, having conversations around homelessness. And I think one of the most important things that we can all do to address the evil that is homelessness is to educate ourselves, and I'm certainly learning all the time, and the more that we challenge our assumptions, the more that we educate ourselves, the sooner homelessness can be ended or reduced as much as it possibly can be. So thank you very, very much for taking the time to join us. You know, just to sum up a few of the things that we talked about today, and we've heard from Paul about, you know, and most people who are homeless are actually hidden homeless. 99% of people who are homeless aren't actually rough sleeping, and people who are rough sleeping, the vast majority of them have experienced serious trauma, mostly in their childhoods as well. And we've heard from Paul, how can we help people who are street homeless who we see, and we've heard that we can give them a smile, we can say hello, we can ask questions, ask how are they hungry, would they like some food. Thank you, Teresa, for that suggestion. And we can download the StreetLink app, or if we haven't got the app, we can call StreetLink, and we can give our time. We can give of our time to homelessness support organisations, or if we want to, we can donate to those organisations as well. And thank you very much, Teresa, for sharing that wonderful story about the early days of Noah, when the father came in and his children were outside, happy to have jam on the bread, which made me smile, but at the same time it's heartbreaking at the same time as well, to think of those children in the situation that they were in. And thank you, Teresa, for your questions about begging, and Paul for your answers about how so often it's linked to addiction, and how the professional begging is a little bit of a myth. And thank you to everybody for your questions and contributions. And I really enjoyed seeing you all today. And thank you very, very much, Paul, for taking the time to talk with us. And just remains to me to say, have a wonderful evening. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.